Hello, everyone. Welcome to another weekly episode of Shadow Space. I am your host, Laura Brown. And for all of my returning listeners, I always like to start out by giving you guys a good shout out because it really does mean so much to me. Your support and your continued listenership is so important to me, and it means the world to me. So I always like to start out by thanking you guys and just welcoming you all to the show. And for all my new listeners who are not familiar with who I am your host, Laura Brown. I am a trauma-informed meditation and breathing coach, and I publish weekly episodes on my podcast, generally related to self-discovery, working with the shadows, introspection, and so much more. And, I just want to say the shadow is just often the hidden parts of ourselves, the unconscious parts and ideas that we hold about ourselves that we may not be aware of. So my podcast aims to guide those people who are perhaps seeking understanding in that area of their life, or just wanting to know more answers, or, just sort of curious about certain patterns that may be holding them back. However, I do also like to share a full disclaimer because sometimes I do cover certain topics that I deem are pretty sensitive. So I want to share a full disclaimer that I am not a licensed therapist. And by all means, the topics and ideas that I share on my podcast are not meant to diagnose or treat anyone. They're really just all references to my own personal life, my own personal experiences. And so I always like to tell anyone whom I speak to really just use your best discernment when it comes to your health and well-being. It is so important for me to say that because there's so much professional help available out there. There's so much professional support available, and I am happy as well to be a resource to you guys. If you do need my help in that area to help guide you in that area, more than happy to be a guide for you guys in that area, okay? And with that being said, I do also want to share my personal website with you guys if you'd like to connect with me there or on my socials. My website is shadowspacehealing.com, and my socials on Instagram is shadowspacehealing, and on TikTok it is shadowspacehealing. You can search for shadowspacehealing and I should pop up. And feel free to follow me, send me a message there, or leave me a message here as well. I'm always open to connecting with you guys in whichever way is easier for you all. Okay? All right. So before I dive into today's topic, I'm also super excited about something that I've discovered about my podcast. Part of the reason why I enjoy doing this so much is that, for one, I do love being here, being on this platform and sharing some of my experiences with you guys, and hopefully some of the things that I share resonate with you all, or at least helps you or enlightens you in one way or another. That has really always been my goal with my podcast. However, I do also enjoy digging into the podcast and just seeing where some of the listenership is coming from. And, it's just so cool for me to see, the power of a podcast and how it connects people from all over the world. And so last week I was checking my podcast analytics, which is something I really enjoy doing just because I'm just so curious about where, people are tuning in from. And I've discovered I have people tuning in from Ireland. Yay! Oh my God. I was so happy when I saw that, because to me, it just means that there is a global reach, and that hopefully, what I'm sharing here resonates with people all over the world. It's not just about people who are in my area or people who I know. I think, we can all lean on each other and really all be a guide and support to each other, no matter where we are in the world. And that is part of just the joy of this podcast for me. It's just being able to connect with people from all over the world and just from all walks of life. So I just wanted to share that because this is just something that's just been so amazing to discover. And I hope it keeps reaching more people. And I really do hope it does continue to help people in whichever capacity that is possible. Again, that has always been my ultimate goal with my podcast. All right. So with all that being said, I have another awesome topic for you guys today. Actually, it is a quote. I had a different topic about this week, for this week's show, I should say. And I saw a quote last night that just grabbed me and just kind of, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I see certain things and I'm just like, oh my God, this is a message. So this was sort of like that for me. This was a quote that I don't have my phone in front of me, so I probably will not say it or state it the way it was stated, but I'm going to attempt to say it again. But it was basically a quote that said, "Be prepared to wake up every day and conquer your self-sabotaging behaviors." So it was something like to that effect. Okay. And it was like, it just called out to me because, as I'm working through my shadow, and I share a lot about working with the shadow, you discover a lot of things, and some of the things that you discover are not always pleasant. And some of those discoveries for me have been some of my self-sabotaging behaviors. And in light of that, it's like when you dive into that space and you start to look at, the self-sabotaging patterns, the behaviors, the habits that you exhibit every single day without any awareness around it, but that continue to hinder you in life. It is quite an eye-opening experience. At least for me, it has been. And so I wanted to kind of share some thoughts around that and just some of my own inner workings with self-sabotage. So, I think as we all probably know, self-sabotage is just some of the behaviors and the habits and the ideas, the patterns, things that we do to kind of get in our own way. It's not necessarily what other people do that hinders us. And I think that's the idea behind self-sabotage, And so for me, when I started to peel back the layers and work through that area of my life, I realized even in my perception of the fact that I thought other people did something was participating in those self-sabotaging behaviors. So for example, blaming others all the time, leads to us, feeding into that victim mindset that we are not somewhat empowered to overcome or to work through or to navigate through something that we are going through. And granted, sometimes we are not. Sometimes things can become really difficult to the point where we may need other interference, other people to come in and help us. And that's really always encouraged. I am a big believer in the more support you have, the better. But sometimes it's our own doings that get in our own way. And the interesting thing about that is that we are not aware of it at all. Most of us have zero clue, zero awareness. We perpetually do the same things over and over and over and over and over and over again until they become so self-defeating to the point of just complete, oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for here? To the point where we just don't feel empowered anymore to move forward in our life. So the idea about self-sabotage that I have discovered is that we have to be willing to be honest with ourselves. We have to really look at ourselves objectively and say, what am I doing that is getting in my way? And for me, another example of that would be procrastination. It has played such a huge role in my life. And for a very long time, actually, I didn't think I was a procrastinator because I have had a career where I was a super multitasker. I'm sorry, guys. I can't seem to get my words out correctly today. I'm not sure why. But anyway, I've been a super multitasker in my career. I've had careers where I was touching 15 things at the same time, juggling things, moving things, creating things, finishing things, starting others, managing things, catching things. I mean, I can't even fathom how I've done all the things that I've done in my previous career. But, that's neither here nor here, neither here nor there. Like I said, I just can't seem to get my words out today. But so when I reflected on just the idea of being a procrastinator, I didn't see myself that way just because of the examples I gave in my career. I always thought I was somebody who's a go-getter, which I am. I always thought I was somebody who was an overachiever, which I was until I understood the meaning behind that. I always thought I was someone who's driven, which I am, but I never saw myself as somebody who's a procrastinator. And so when I looked into that, I was kind of baffled by the discoveries I uncovered. So procrastination doesn't always mean that you don't intend to do the things that you want to do. It just means that your own self-defeating thoughts, habits, ideas, behaviors get in the way of you actually accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish. And so for me, it was the self-defeating thoughts. It was the self-criticism, which I've talked about in my previous episodes. So if you guys are interested in hearing that, I'm not sure how many episodes ago it was, but I did dive into self-criticism a little bit. And so when you start to peel back the layers and work through the shadow to try to uncover like the root cause and why you do the things that you do, it's so fascinating when you come across the discoveries that you begin to understand about yourself. So for me, procrastination had nothing to do with the fact that I wasn't driven enough to do the thing that I wanted to do. It was more so my own self-defeating thoughts. It was the beliefs I had about myself, or lack thereof, my abilities or inabilities, the way I saw myself in relation to what I wanted to do. And so that's what led me to procrastinate. And so how do you overcome that? These are all questions I've asked myself too, right? How do you overcome that? It's really by starting to kind of notice the habits, the behaviors that you participate in. Are they supportive to you? Are they helpful? Are they helping you get closer to your goals? Are they, serving you in your life? Do you feel good about what you're doing? Do you see yourself moving ahead, moving forward? Again, it doesn't have to be fast moving. Like in my previous career, it was all super fast paced. And so I always thought, oh my God, I can move things and do things that are inhumanly possible within, hours. And so I always thought of myself as this person who's capable of doing so much at once, which I still am. But now I understand that that wasn't necessarily a healthy way of being. But again, when we dive into these layers and start to peel back, the thoughts, the ideas and the behaviors and observe the patterns, we can begin to see through that. And this is where the shadow work comes in, because then you can look at yourself objectively without criticism, hopefully, which is something we all do so well. But the idea to help overcome this is really to look at yourself objectively and be really honest with yourself about the things that you are observing and why you do the things that you do, and why do you do them, how you do them. These two questions were just so transformative transformational for me. Again, my words, my goodness, it must be something in the air today. Anyway, oh, by the way, I don't script my show either. I love to just talk off the cuff. So sometimes the words can get lost in translation or what have you. But yeah, so again, the idea and the principle here is to make sure that you're asking yourself empowering questions so that you can begin to dive in and make these discoveries. This is why it's so important, right? To just ask these questions and take a really honest look at yourself. And if you can't do that for yourself, maybe lean on a trusted friend, maybe lean on a trusted family member, lean on somebody that you trust who can be fair with you, and hopefully without being too critical, they can look at you and say, okay, this is what I notice about you, right? That can be extremely helpful to help us overcome it. Because again, these behaviors and habits that we do, sometimes we engage in them for so long and they end up costing us so much before we realize that they have not been in support of our growth, or in support of who we want to be, or in support of who we are even. You know, who we are continues to reveal itself the more we evolve and grow. So certain habits, certain behaviors, certain patterns, right? Certain things that we have adopted along the way, perhaps as a coping mechanism, you know, to help us out in life, may not continue to serve us along the way. And I think this is where the honest feedback needs to come in for yourself, you know, or if you can't do that, like I said, lean on somebody that you trust who can help you along with that, right? And so this is why it's so important to really navigate this space with an openness. I always say with an openness because, you know, when you notice certain things that you don't like about yourself, it's easy to close off or shut off or go right back into the, you know, poor me victim mindset. You know, why did this had to happen to me mindset, right? It's easy to feed into that and stay stuck in that space. And again, like I said earlier in the show, I started to notice my own self-sabotaging behaviors in the way I was perceiving others towards me. And so that's so powerful when you make that realization, because it's not easy to admit to yourself that you have played a role in being a victim of your own circumstances. That's never easy. Nobody will sit there and say, oh, I'm a victim of my own life. You know what I mean? People try their best to hide that, or to hide themselves from it. And so to have that realization and really have this honest, dialogue with yourself is very important in helping you overcome it. We can't overcome what we don't know, right? And so that's also the other part that's important to say. So back to the self-sabotaging behaviors and how we can overcome that. So for me, it was the honest conversation with myself. It's the honest observation. It's doing the shadow work. It's the digging to try to uncover where, why I was doing the things that I was doing in order to begin to understand. And again, we can begin somewhere by just understanding. That's also a very, very important step. If we can understand something, perhaps we can choose differently on how we want to move with that thing. And so self-sabotaging doesn't always have to be our habits and behaviors. For the majority, it is. But other things are, like for me, I noticed it was the phone a lot, staying on social media. I made a conscious decision last year to where I had given myself certain times of day where I would be online, checking my socials, because it's a big part of what I do too. And then I would disconnect. And I saw such a huge difference in my life. because we can stay stuck in these patterns of addiction. And I'm going to dive into addiction too, because I do want to talk about addiction from my perspective of things that I've noticed that are not necessarily what we always talk about or hear about. So I will definitely dive into addictions from my perspective and share my thoughts on that with you guys on my next episodes coming up. So make sure to tune back in. But self-sabotaging behaviors can be addictions too, compulsive behaviors that we engage in, such as perhaps, I know people I've encountered or people in my life who have had addictions with food. Anytime there's a stressful situation, they lean into food as a coping mechanism. These are all self-defeating, self-sabotaging behaviors that can show up in our life. But if we're not aware of the reasons and why we do what we do and how it's tied to how we're reacting to a situation or circumstance, then we'll never understand how to overcome it. And so this is why I wanted to talk about it, because there's always a way out. The way out is by us really kind of tuning in to try to be curious about our own habits, our own behaviors as it relates to our life. Now, if life is moving smoothly and everything is great and you're feeling amazing and you're in a good space and you don't feel like you need this exercise, by all means, cruise along, live your life. As they say, live your best life. But if there's certain areas of your life where you notice, things are not quite working out the way that you would like them to work out or that you're hoping for, perhaps it's worth exploring. Perhaps it's worth taking that dive and trying to uncover, why are you doing the things that you're doing and how are they showing up in your life? Are they helpful? Are they harmful? Are they supportive? Are they not? These are all questions that only we can answer individually for ourselves. No one can do this work for us, unfortunately. And all the things that I share on my podcast, it's really with the idea that we are truly, truly empowered to make the life changes that we're desiring, that we so deserve. All of us, we are so empowered to do so. But the disempowering part of that is thinking that we are stuck and that we are destined to be a certain way for the rest of our life. So to me, that's the disempowering part of staying stagnant and staying stuck in a situation or in a circumstance or just an environment or stage in life where you don't think you can overcome it. Now, like I said, there are certain things that happen in life that kind of get in our way, that are beyond our control. But for the most part, some of the things that I talk about here are, just experiences I've had with my own self, things that I have had to endure for a very long time before I began to understand that I'm empowered to make a change. And here's how I can do that. And so this is why I want to talk about this, because I talk to a lot of people who constantly make very similar remarks to me, who say, well, you know what? I don't think I can do that. I don't think I'm that way. I don't think I'm, good enough in this area. I don't think I'm smart enough here. I don't think that, I'm driven enough. I don't think that I can do this, and I hear the same remarks over and over and over again. And so to me, when I hear that, I understand exactly where that is coming from. And, I want to tell everyone that I talk to who says things like that to me, that listen, it's possible to overcome this, but you have to do the work. You have to be willing to do the work. No one can do the work for you, and again, I use words like willingness here purposely because willingness is a huge part of doing the work. If you're not willing and you're not ready, you're not there, then you cannot overcome it, of course. And I think it's worth mentioning that sometimes we have to go through the same cycles over and over and over again before it starts hitting us and going, you know what, this is actually not working. I've hit the wall 4 or 5 times. Hopefully you realize it before then, but listen, no judgment here. I've done it myself. I've gone like 10 times hitting the wall before I had this epiphany and aha moment. And then you know what ensues after that? It's like you say to yourself, am I not smart enough? Here comes the self-defeating thoughts and inner critics that chime in again. But again, no judgment, but sometimes you do have to go through the same cycles over and over again before you can realize that this is not working for you. And this is where self-sabotage is such a big, big, big part of all of our lives, most of us who I still continually catch myself in certain parts of my life where I'm like, you know what, that's not helpful to you. And what can you do differently? And so again, we can overcome these behaviors as long as we're aware of them and as long as we understand them and as long as we're willing to do the work. So again, these things can present themselves in so many different ways, but the biggest realization and one of the biggest things I want to leave you guys with is that, we are so good at getting in our own way that we don't even realize that. We actually have gotten away so far away from holding ourselves accountable, looking at ourselves objectively, that we think that everybody else is the problem. It's someone else's fault. It's their fault. It's her fault. It's his fault. It's life's fault. It's the circumstances of my life. It's poor me. It's woe me. And I'm not saying this in a judgmental way whatsoever, because I've been in this energy most of my life until I realized that this is not helpful to me, because guess what? There's only so many times you can say poor me, woe me, all of these, disempowering things to yourself before you realize they're not actually changing you in any way. They're not changing you in any capacity. They're not helpful to you, right? They're not transforming you. As my mentor would say, blame and shame have no transformational value whatsoever. And I couldn't agree more. So sitting there blaming yourself or blaming others and just saying poor me is not going to help you move forward at all. I'm sorry to break it down in this way, but I have experienced it myself. I speak from my own personal experience, my own battles and my own inner battles with these self-defeating habits, self-defeating thoughts, self-defeating ideas, self-sabotaging behaviors. I've dealt with it for so many years, and now I can identify them. I'm not going to say almost quickly, but I can identify them better now. And I know I'm empowered to work through them. And so are we all. But again, it begins with us having the willingness, the awareness, and, the willingness to invest in doing the work. Okay. So again, I only get 30 minutes on each show. So I have to leave you guys here with this topic. As I always like to say, I hope this was enlightening to you all in some way, helpful to you all in some other way, or perhaps just empowering in another way for you guys. Okay. So I will be back in my next few episodes, and I do want to touch on addictions because I think that's a very important topic as well. Until then, I'm going to leave you here with the show, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And sorry for all the ramblings and just the words that aren't coming through. And here they're doing the same thing again. I feel like somebody's playing a bad joke on me, but that's okay. I push through, I muster through, and that's all we can do sometimes. So anyway, I just want to leave you guys here, and I just want to remind you that please remember the light exists within you, and don't forget to shine your light. Okay? As always, peace and blessings, love and light, and I will see you guys on my next episode. Have a fantastic weekend, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.